put me back through commando training. I would rather be wet and cold with, 80 pounds on my back, walking up a mountain with the rain, sideways on my face or whatever, than having to deal with my 13-year-old daughter who is growing up. And, my instinct is always to protect. And it's the worst thing I can do with her. For me, I was never really bothered about putting my life in danger. I was bothered about when I had to send troops into an environment that I knew statistically, something was going to happen to them.
On today's episode, a seasoned property investor, business coach, and a British Army Major, Nick Thorpe. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's okay.
I want to delve straight into the deep end. Tell me something about your childhood or the time that you were growing up that you think had a very strong impact on the type of person that you've become.
Cool. Great question. Well, yeah, thanks very much for having me here. Yeah, that is very deep to start off with, isn't it?
That's what we're about here. We don't do the surface stuff. We go straight into the important bits.
Yeah, fantastic. So I suppose my childhood was full of love. That was the first thing. It felt warm and it felt caring. I grew up in a typical kind of broken home, with in a family environment that was quite kinetic. I grew up with a stepfather that was quite violent towards my mother, and at the time my instinct was always to protect. And I think that's probably one of the kind of big traits that I took forward. I've always felt like I always want to be there to protect the people, even if they don't want my protection. And that kind of carried through my career. And
because you've served almost 17 years in the army, in the British Army, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you enrolled when you were 17.
Yeah.
Do you think that had a strong correlation?
I do, but also I think, the army was an exciting thing. It was a career progression, but almost a bit of an escape as well.
Escape from what? From the house environment?
Yeah, I mean, so my early childhood was like that, and then my mother kind of remarried to a fantastic human being, wonderful man, and that was loving, and I almost felt like she was kind of safe and looked after, so I could go off and do my thing, because I've always had an itch.
An itch for? An
itch for excitement or risk, or I've always tried to push myself. No, I'm a slow starter. I'll go in and I'll underwhelm most people. And then once I get going, I tend to do well. So
that applies to every aspect of your life, business, career.
It really does, yeah. I start slow and then it skyrockets very quickly. So like in the military, I joined the military as a private soldier, as a technician, actually working on different weapon systems, learning, fixing them effectively. And then I was like, well, I can do more than this. So I went and did my parachutist and commando training. I thought, I can do more than this. And my boss was a bit rubbish. So
objectively, or?
I think I probably learned, you learn as much from a bad leader and manager as you do from a good one. And I thought, I can do a better job than you. So I kind of managed to talk my way into commissioning and went through the military academy, Sandhurst, became an officer. And I always every job I went into, I always pushed, and I did very well, from coming top of my peer group when we were all kind of ranked, as a grading, through to the kind of jobs that I got.
And how long did that progression take you? How much time did you kind of spend in each role?
So as a private soldier, I was about, let's do the maths, probably about 5 or 6 years. So I was a corporal, and then went through Sandhurst, went through the ranks relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. And I left the army almost on a bit of a whim.
Explain that.
I was probably, they say leave on a high.
Yeah.
And I was probably on a high. I had really good jobs and really good reports, really good recommendations. My peer group now are kind of colonels.
How do you leave on a high though? It's easier said than done.
Yeah.
What made you leave?
That itch, that scratch. I wanted to go and do something. I wanted to, I felt like there was something else. I felt like there was something more. And that feeling is, I think, probably what has carried me through. I've always felt like get on to something else, and I'm destined for something greater.
What is greater to you? What does that mean?
Depends what day of the week or whether I've had coffee or not. But yeah, probably greatness, purpose, success, fulfillment, happiness all comes around looking after my health, looking after my income, and then looking after my family life. Yeah, that's it. Health, income, life.
So at some point you realize that that will not happen in the army.
Yeah, I think that I got to a point where it was moving from doing the job to more of a political job. It was kind of down to who you knew and...
Is it the famous glass ceiling that we're talking about?
Probably, yeah, probably. And I saw a fantastic career, but also I had a family. My first daughter was born, whilst I was kind of in the army, and I was away a lot, and I wanted to be around a little bit more.
And I suppose there's also the factor of, I don't know, were you ever in situations where your life was in danger?
Yeah, but that was, I always liken this to go and train to be a hairdresser, but never actually cut anyone's hair. I trained to do a job, and I did the job I was trained to do, and I volunteered to do it. But there was plenty of times where you were curled up in a ball waiting to go, or you were fighting. And the curled up in a ball thing is about, a lot of what we did in Iraq was you were based in, and I was based in Basra in Iraq for quite a long time. We used to get rocketed every day.
Rocketed
bombs being dropped,
Okay.
fired from kind of the local town into the camp. So when they come, they fire, there's not really much warning. Sometimes there's an air raid kind of siren goes off, sometimes there isn't, and all you can do is curl up in a ball, because there's nothing you can, it's potluck, there's nothing you can do really. So sometimes you could crawl to a shelter if you're nearby, but sometimes you're in the shower. I've been naked on the floor.
Wow.
Whilst you hear the impacts, and what happens is they go boom, 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 they get louder and closer to you, and you don't know if the next one is...
And all you can do is just wait?
Just wait. And then, the next day
Wow.
or later in the day, you can go out and try and find the cheeky monkeys that were shooting them.
Wow. So all these years, almost 17 years, what do you think are the things that you picked up most? What did you learn that stuck with you? Which are the things that you've inherited from that experience?
Definitely a very wide perspective. So there's not really much that can top it. So you take that kind of selfless commitment, and that there's nothing you've done that can be worse than being in that environment. So then you start business, as I did, and go, oh, you think you're having a tough day? There's kind of nothing compared to that. There's the practical aspects of being able to communicate. There's the being able to manage your time, being able to get stuff done, relatively quickly, being able to prioritize. That's the basic level stuff. And I would say the next tier of that is being able to put up with quite a high threshold of pain. And I don't mean physical pain. I mean, when you've been in that environment, your threshold for being able to push through, whether you're hungry or you're tired or you don't know what you're doing or you're feeling uncomfortable, you can push through that comfort zone.
So I guess it's that discipline, endurance, and not giving up.
Yeah. And discipline outperforms motivation, doesn't it?
Yes,
so
always does.
Always, always, always. So take that selfless commitment and move it into an environment where you have choice and you have freedom.
And I think it's also another thing, which is you really have learned how to manage fear. So as you said, perspective also translates into that fearlessness almost, because you know that whatever happens in this business, even if it goes, belly up and you need to close the company, so what? In the bigger picture, you'll just try again and you'll do something else and you'll do it probably better. So because of that perspective, it allows you to drop that fear, which is one of the biggest reasons why people don't even start, let alone fail in businesses.
Yeah, that's right. And it will fail because, like seasons, everything comes and goes.
Do you think, almost taking away how much you've gained from that military experience, do you think everyone should go to army?
Oh, gosh, good question. No.
Why?
Because
it certainly has given you an upper hand.
Yeah, so I grew up, my grandfather was the big male influence in my life as I grew up, and he went through national service. And very interestingly, he joined as a technician in national service and then came out as retrained as an electrician, like I did. That was my resettlement from the army, and had his own businesses. And I think I've probably subconsciously followed a lot of his footsteps. The base level of being able to make your bed, being a good citizen, being a good human, being a good person, there's an element of that is, you're taught that you have to live that, otherwise you don't fit into that environment. The downside to that is you create robots and you create people that they have a certain level of skill set, but also, one of the fantastic things about society is the vibrant, the differences. We're so interconnected, we're so globalized now as a, human race. I think you would lose that if everyone went through that basic level of training.
So the upside, which is the discipline, the ability to work in team, to execute orders, to, be fearless, doesn't outweigh the downside.
Not for me, but I'm coming from the perspective of having that. So if someone comes from the perspective of wanting those skill sets.
I only ask that because I've always, in a way, had much respect and admired people that have done that experience, because I can really clearly see those qualities that they gain from going through that experience. So I've always thought that countries like, Switzerland and Israel, where army service is mandatory, I think it's beneficial almost for everyone. But then again, I'm coming from a place where I've never done it. So who am I to speak about that? But from that, what I've observed, I've always thought that it could be something beneficial.
But then you can argue it almost makes people a little bit too, I don't want to generalize about societies, but in different countries, but it can make them too observant. I had a call with one of my too compliant. Yeah. I had a call with one of my investment clients from Singapore, and we were talking about COVID, and we were talking about how if there's anywhere in the world, I found from all my time in Singapore and my interactions, people are quite, they follow the process, they follow the rules. Whereas, in Leeds where I live, if, they overlaid the rules of, when you're 21, you get married, you get a government flat, you can do certain bits with your time, certain bits with your money. People wouldn't do it. So yeah, I suppose, and they go through some form of national service out there, I think. So
there's ups and downs.
Yeah,
fair enough. So after you exited the military, how did you decide what to do next? You've done a lot of things within property, and we'll get to that. But what was the transition period for you when you left the military?
Yeah, I didn't have a clue, and I can follow the standard kind of ex-army officer route of going into management consultancy or go and do a apprenticeship with someone, or something like that. And I knew I wanted control and freedom over my life and my time, and I wasn't really motivated by money. I was more motivated by managing my own diary. So I did Lean Six Sigma. I did some management training, some project management training, which was kind of an odd way of doing it because I'd been leading and managing people for years, and at the end of my career, I did my kind of qualifications in it.
Did you find it useful, or did you find the things obvious that were taught to you?
It was just a different language. That was all. And
theory versus practice.
Yeah. And also, I didn't realize that I spoke a different language. Quite often the military, we just got a different way of explaining things, and
it's gonna be this, do it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And still now, I say things to people and they look at me and I'm going, oh no, that's not the right terminology.
Okay.
So yeah, I did that, and also, like I said, I qualified as electrician just because probably subconsciously following my grandfather's footsteps, but consciously I quite like properties. I was going to buy a house, and whilst I was there, I was introduced to, there was a guy on my course, Harry, who'd bought these things called HMOs. And I was like, what is this? Yeah. And I'll tell you a funny story. So I went on my first ever webinar, and I didn't realize it was, I thought I'd put a shirt and a tie on, and I was sat in my hotel room with this shirt and tie on thinking, oh, this is a two-way and I have to talk on it. And I sat there and listened to this webinar about property investment.
And everyone else was not with their cameras on, and if they were, it was in pajamas.
Yeah, this is a few years ago as well. Technology's really come on, hasn't it? But I don't think I'd ever been on a Zoom call before, at that point.
So over the years, I think it's been now 10 years that you've been in property.
Yeah.
So you've done development, you've had a construction company managing refurbs, sales, letting and property management business, property sourcing business, even an accounting business, and also training and coaching business. So very much 360 degrees. I imagine you started one thing and then you realized that you can give a full spectrum service to the people that you were working with, and that's why you kind of moved in all those directions. Or how was the evolution for you?
Yeah, it was quite simple. I bought a house and refurbished it, and then I bought another one and thought, oh, I'll be clever about this. I'll get someone in to help me convert it. So I wasn't doing all the work myself. When I go back into the first house, I was literally watching YouTube how to tile, how to fit a kitchen.
DIY house.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit ropey now, actually, but it's done well. My first house cost me £39,200.
The deposit or the house?
No, the house. Yeah.
No comment here.
It revalued at 65. I spent 10 on it. And I got all my money out. And I was like, I've got a house and I've got all my money back. So I was like, oh, I'll keep going, and I carried on kind of doing that again for a while. And then I was like, oh gosh, I've got these people that live in my house, tenants. What do I do with them? And then people started saying, oh, can you do that for me? So that's kind of how my
very organic.
Yeah, very much. It was almost accidentally. And then, fast forward a few years and I sourced over 450 properties. It made sense for me to have a kind of construction element plugged in. It made sense for me to have a property management business plugged in. The group of companies that I grew were, I needed someone to look after the finances, and it was kind of a business partner and I, we kind of did the maths and worked out it would be cheaper to employ an accountant. And then we were like, well, our existing investment clients, mostly international investment clients, because I solved money first, where does the money come from, which is kind of the tree that most people struggle shaking in property investment. We were like, well, let's bring them in as accountancy clients, and that covers the accountant's wage. And it all kind of grew from there, really.
Very interesting, because so for people listening, what you're saying is you were doing these property deals for yourself, and then other people were interested in doing the same because they heard, that basically you're making money from it, so they want to do the same. And then you realized that you can actually expand your own portfolio through leveraging other people's money. And this is when you had the investors, or was it more the international investors also heard or came to know about what you were doing and wanted to be in with that?
Yeah, we didn't really use, I think in the early days, we probably did some joint ventures and we quite quickly cleared them out, really. We made money through sourcing, through refurbishment, project management, and through training, and invested that into assets, and whether that was property or the investment fund that I manage. So yeah, that's kind of, and what I mean by I solved the money piece first is, you go to a property event and quite often there's a lot of people there looking for investment, whereas we went to find the people with money first and then offered them the investment opportunities.
Smart.
Whether that was in developments that we were doing, whether that was in, we'll find you an asset and we will convert that asset, add value to it, and then we'll protect it by managing it. That's why probably our biggest group of investors are Hong Kong, Singapore, Scandinavia.
Yes, because in the end of the day, UK is still considered as a fairly safe place to invest, especially in property. And you're just tapping into solving somebody else's problem.
That's right.
Whilst growing your own business.
Yeah. There's a stable-ish economy, legal system. We've got a pretty good track record of property doubling in value roughly every 10 years. You look back 200 years, that's kind of the maths of it. And it's a relatively safe asset class. I do think you need to look wider and step back to look, it's one asset class. During COVID, another example of property paid for my life because people paid their rent, and whereas my other businesses struggled a bit more.
Yes. It's all about diversification in the end. You don't want to be just in property, but you don't want to also have no property.
Yeah. I also love it. As well. I really love property, you know, like I like the simplicity and everyone gets it. You know, if I was selling some kind of crypto widget or, you know, whatever, you know, like the concept is fantastic. Whereas people tend to have a front door and that they walk into and
Yeah.
a living room and a bedroom and, you know, they get the concept of it.
Well, you say that, but I think when it comes to property investing, it's still not that straightforward unless you're talking about literally flipping. Like flipping, everyone understands. But even adding value and refurbishing properties, let alone the more advanced strategies like, you know, HMO or commercial conversions and things like that, people might not know about. And even a basic thing such as being a buy-to-let landlord. So knowing that you can leverage the bank's money to make more money, essentially. I don't think that everyone knows that.
Yeah, you're right, actually. You know, in Australia, they've got one of our Australian clients explained to me, they have a strategy which is called negative gearing, which is probably what a lot of landlords are moving to now, where you buy a property, the rental income covers, you know, 60% of the mortgage and you top up the 40%. And then in 20 years' time, you sell the property and you make some money on the capital appreciation.
Wow. Different area, different strategy,
But
I
that's
guess.
that's their strategy.
Yeah.
So you chat to an Australian client and say, oh, no, your rent covers the mortgage and you make some cash flow from it.
Their eyes go
Yeah,
like this. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Tough market. And I thought we have it bad here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, talking about what property can actually do for you. So you mentioned, I reckon one of your core values is freedom, because that's what you mentioned in the beginning as well. That's very important to you. So I imagine property has done that for you, has given you the freedom that you wanted. When you exited the army, you were at zero salary, basically. So from the moment when you started in property in 2014, was it zero or did you have something to put into it?
So I volunteered for redundancy. So I started with £100,000.
Okay. So in how long, I would ask you, how much have you made up until now? But you tell me what you're comfortable with sharing. Like, how long did it take you to get to your freedom number with property?
Yeah. So you've got to think of it in two strategies. You've got to think of your wealth creation column and your cash flow column. Now, what a lot of people struggle with, it takes a long time to get paid from property, and the true value and the true return of a property, you need to look at over 10 years at least, because tenants change, boilers go, roofs get broken, maintenance, you know, the whole kind of end-to-end value. You might think you make money 1 month and then lose it for the next 6 months, and then make it for the next 6 years, and then lose it for the next 6 years. And that's just,
you're not making it super appealing for people listening.
But it's about balance. If you have one property and, you know, that's 100% of the issue. If you have 10 properties, it's 20% of the issue is now, or 10% of the issue, sorry. So yeah, I suppose my stepping stones were, I focused on cash flow first. So I focused on how I can generate an income. And I never expected to, my property strategy is for it to self-fund and self-grow, not to have it as a cash flow strategy. Now that altered. So during COVID, I flicked it and started taking money out of the portfolio so I could live, but that's gone back to self-funding. So at the moment, my property portfolio, you know, decent 7-figure portfolio, and I can buy a new property out of the rental income roughly every quarter. So it just self-grows.
You've retired twice. Talk to me about that.
Yes. So the military retirement was I was just about 30, 31, something like that. And, you know, that was I had a soft landing from that because my full-time military career, I hopped into the Army Reserve part-time for a couple of years just so I could put bread and, you know, water on the table. And very, very quickly, my property business income outweighed what I was earning in the reserve. So my priorities were kind of conflicted. So my first retirement was ending on a high. It felt like the right time. And then, growing the businesses, you know, this ecosystem, and there was enough income coming in for me to not really need to do anything other than
Ever again?
ever again. Yeah.
Through passive income.
Through as passive as you can get income.
Let's unpack actually that, because I think people have, especially people that haven't gone the route yet, they have a distorted vision of what passive income is. So tell me, what is as passive as you can get?
I right now I own a property management business, and my properties are fully managed by the business, but I still need to understand, I have an assistant helping me with my day-to-day, family office piece, looking after mortgages, insurances, all that kind of stuff. I still need to make the more strategic decisions on what to do, whether to buy a property. I think there's two steps to an income. The first one is, does it run without you? That's probably the first step to a business running by itself. The second step is, does it grow without you? And quite often people have jobs, they don't even have a business. So to run without you is relatively simple. It's checks and measures and processes. I'm quite technical in my thought process of this, so it's just literally spreadsheets and measure what you treasure. That's the saying. But the growing without you is the harder bit, because it's finding people that if they're good enough to grow it without you, they're good enough to grow it by themselves.
So what happens there? How do you find a solution to that?
You have to have everything so it's transferable, but everything so it's transparent as well, because it's very easy to slip up. Like right now, interest rates are hiking. If I didn't know the cost and the mortgages I have in place, I use other people's money, the bank's money, to leverage my money so I can use inflation to pay down the debt. That's my kind of property investment strategy. I think that if I wasn't aware of that, it would be very easy for me to lose, my income, lose the ability for that portfolio to grow.
So essentially you're saying that in this moment when the inflation is very high, you want to get on as much debt as you can.
Yep.
But you have to be in a position to do that.
Yeah. Who's not in a position to?
I mean, people that are buying the property for the first time, that maybe don't have that big of a deposit. You tell me.
There's a significant amount of money out there. So much money. And you just got to give people an offer that is impossible to refuse.
Elaborate on that.
So, the concept sell or be sold. The concept is we're all selling all the time. I would say I'm an introverted, push people away salesperson. I have quite a successful coaching business, do really, really well with coaching. I'm very good at it because I think it's very easy to earn an income. I think it's very hard to keep the money the other side.
Why do you say that?
Why is it easy to earn? Because all you've got to do is follow a process and understand what your motivation is. It's quite simple steps to generate an income.
In property?
In anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of finding the systems that work and just following the steps.
And finding other people that are doing it successfully and just copying them. I am not a creative person. This is a recent realization that, if I've got to think of something, my first step is Google, or right now it's ChatGPT. I am.
It's crazy how quickly we became reliant on that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like adoption was 0 seconds. Everyone now is using it. That's crazy.
But as a non-creative person, if I'm constantly have business ideas, constant have life ideas, all sorts of bits and bobs. My hack for that is I have a little red moleskin notebook, and that's my good ideas book. And whatever it is, I'll write it in there. And if it keeps coming back around, it keeps sticking. I'm launching a property networking event later this year. That's been sticking in my brain for a few years really, and now's the right time.
Yeah, sometimes you have to wait it out.
Yeah.
I also have a lot of those things that I know that I want to do. I know I will do them. There's absolutely no rush to do them.
Yeah.
So, and then, in some years, a perfect circumstance occurs and you just do them and it's perfect.
So this income piece, I think it's very, you can judge quite clearly whether someone's going to achieve it or not. And I think most people would be successful. What they tend to do is run out of time.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, if you were on the planet for 200 years, you lived 200 years, eventually you're going to get there. I think what people struggle with is this health, income, life. Suddenly, 1 in 2 of us will get cancer. That's the stat.
1 and 2?
Yeah, 50%. Yeah. So there's that to deal with. There's whatever other life, life has an ability to throw trauma at us. There's that's health, and that's physical health, but also, your brain as well, looking after your mental health. It's very, very, it's a hot topic for guys and women, right now, especially because of COVID. I think it perhaps amplified it a little bit.
For sure.
So the health piece is that comes at you, then life is busy.
So all of that plays together so that it's harder for you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
So what's the solution?
That is a great question. And this is a strand of thought that constantly evolves for me. My simplification is HILL, trademarked.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not. Health, income, life. And I think it's impossible to balance it, because I think what happens is by growing all of it proportionally and steadily, it kind of stutters. You don't really make much progress. So the idea is to have little bits of sprints and have the right measures and awareness in place. So, I weigh myself once a week and put that into my MyFitnessPal app. And I know if that's going up for a few weeks, then I need to
make adjustments.
Yeah. I know that, relationships, you've got to put effort, you've got to put time, you've got to kind of give the other person what they want, what they need. But if you're busy with work and you're busy looking after yourself, that bit kind of drops down. So the idea is when you start noticing kind of cracks or start noticing things changing, you adapt.
Yeah. As you were speaking, I was just imagining, I guess I'm a visual person. I was just imagining a graph of, okay, say your finances, say your health, say your relationships. And I really much agree with what you're saying. I don't think that if you had 3 eyes to keep on those 3 bars, right, and you were constantly looking at the 3 of them, it's like almost if you want to raise them and you're raising them all at the same time, then there's so much on your shoulders, they're gonna be raised slower than if you focused on one at a time. And that makes sense, right? Because wherever the focus goes, the energy flows and the results show.
Yeah.
I think the missing part for a lot of people in that equation is how they're feeling about the other 2 bars once they realize that, okay, say relationships, say they've been focusing on improving their relationships with the people that are important to them, and they put the focus there, that bar is being raised. And then say, a couple of weeks, a couple of months later, they're like, oh, this is so great. And then all of a sudden they look around and they're like, and they look down and there are these bars that have been left behind. And then they feel guilty and they feel anxious and they feel all of a sudden that, what to grab, what to start, why am I not there? And so I think that if people have awareness around how this all works, and that in one specific moment, you can only focus and really grow exponentially one thing, then it's normal to then afterwards calmly look at the other 2 and be like, okay, now I've raised the bar here. Which is the next place that I'm going to work on, which is the priority, and then just do the same, but without that guilt and anxiousness.
Yep. And the rub is, it's all very slow and attritional. It's small, unnoticeable changes. If you ate a cheeseburger and you put a stone on, how many cheeseburgers would you eat in a week? And it's exactly that concept about everything from your own well-being to your own physical health to your family, your friends, I've got 3 beautiful children, and that grapple of fatherhood and am I a good father by being able to provide for my children or being there for my children? Well, the simple answer is both, but we're just talking about, well, you can only have one at once. So what do you choose?
You tell me.
Well, yeah, I exactly what we talked about. It's about being aware of it and not letting it get too far.
Yeah, I guess constant check-in and rebalancing of the scales when it's appropriate.
There's also a kind of, a level up from this, which is, I think ultimately we're all searching for our version of happiness. And if you are a self-incubating, self-starting, self-generating bundle of happiness, you love yourself, then the rest of it is not irrelevant, but it adds the perspective, it adds the kind of comfort around, if you are putting a bit of chubber on, or you are kind of you're not really keeping in contact with people.
You'll feel it, and then you'll naturally self-adjust, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
the areas that are important to us in our lives will feel the lack of, or that something's wrong there, and then I think it's a natural kind of walking that path of adjustment towards those.
Hey, and I'm coming from a perspective of making these mistakes. That this is experience, and one of my highest values is learning. I'm listening to a book pretty much every day, podcast at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, and yeah, I made mistakes, but I also wouldn't change any of them, or many of them.
You want to share some of those that you do regret?
Probably, staying around things for too long when
you already know.
Yeah, and that kind of that concept of that gut feeling, learning when to kind of tune into right and wrong. In hindsight, it's perfectly reasonable to go, I knew that was a sign.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's about, I think as more and more kind of you go through more and more trauma, that's the point where you go, well, I'm not putting up with that. Maybe it's a boundary.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest lessons every year is trust your gut. Just trust your gut. We know, like, we have this embedded intelligence in us that tells us things before our thinking brain is able to compute logical answers. We know way before, and it's just a matter of trusting yourself and also being aware enough and present enough to hear those impulses, feel those impulses. But yeah, that's a massive one for me.
I think your gut also protects you, though. So it's about Chimp Paradox, fantastic book. Concept is fantastic. And I think that knowing when to push through it versus when to listen to it is that's the kind of tricky bit that comes with a bit more experience. And we frame our experience. We can, coaches, mentors, whether they're paid coaches, mentors, or just, people that you follow, can give you a reference to know that's right, that's not right. But we tend to like people who go through similar things to us.
Yeah, definitely.
Because one of the human traits is we're all looking for connection at a basic level.
Yeah, that's why the community is so important, and having people in your life that understand you. I think that's one of the prerequisites for a great long-term friendship as well. Understanding.
Yeah.
Even a relationship on any sorts, even a romantic one, everything. You mentioned you have 3 kids. Yeah. I can't help but to have this. I've always thought this from my observation, men that, and women as well, to be fair, that have kids and are married tend to do better financially. Have you noticed that? Because it seems that they have more drive and reason to do it, and they just get more focused because they're not distracted by, your proverbial single life and parties and whatever else the absence of a family entails.
I think it's interesting, actually, because probably from my perspective, it's the opposite.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Like, having children is the most fulfilling, beautiful thing I think, most people can do, but also it's the hardest thing. Put me back through commando training. I would rather be wet and cold with 80 pounds on my back walking up a mountain with the rain sideways on my face or whatever, than having to deal with my 13-year-old daughter who is growing up, and my instinct is always to protect, and it's the worst thing I can do with her
because there are things you can't protect her from.
Yeah, that's right. And she was probably sheltered a bit. Her eyes are a lot wider now. But yeah, I suppose you do have that sense of purpose and that kind of reason why. But also, my thinking's really evolved around my children, that children who go through hardship tend to perform better.
For sure.
I think that it's something that it does drive you and it does motivate you, but also that will always take priority over everything else that's going on, because you've got to look after your basic needs of your children.
So you're saying that, yes, you might have more motivation in in your career and in doing better in business because you need to take care of your kids. But at the same time, whatever career will never come before them. So you might make decisions that might be detrimental to your career in favor of your kids.
Depends what kind of person you are. You know, I grew up without a father, you know, without kind of a strong male influence in my life. I met my father when I was in my early 20s. Went and knocked on the door.
How was that?
Yeah, it was interesting, actually. It was just, you always wonder why. You always wonder.
Did you get the answers?
No.
What did you get?
Christmas presents and, you know, a perfectly level one relationship. But then when I separated from my ex-wife and went through divorce, you know, that really polarized the people around me. And the people that in my camp, right or wrong, stayed with me, and those that weren't in my camp didn't. You know, it really kind of gave me these are the people that I want to take forward in my life.
Interesting. So did you all of a sudden, when you had the separation, lose half of your friends and people?
Yeah.
Wow. How do you navigate something like that?
Learn to love yourself. And that was my year, I think 3 years ago, was self-love. You know, one of the amazing things about the military is it takes away the ability to be affected by the lows. It means
that's invaluable.
You can function. The downside to that is you lose the highs as well. So you end up in a middle bracket.
That's what a lot of people are, especially stoic people, are aiming for.
Yeah. Whereas for me, I want that up and down, and I want that, you know, I kind of...
You want to feel something.
Yeah. Feel something. Yeah. And one of my claim to fame was, you know, I last cried in 1996 or something. But actually, you know, my year of self-love was all about learning to cry and learning to talk about, you know, mental health. You know, a lot of my coaching.
Was that difficult?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Talk about your feelings. What you want about? You know, I'm a Yorkshireman for a start. And then, you know, as a kind of military person, the first time I was ever really in a real kinetic environment where, you know, I actively knew somebody was shooting at me, you know, rounds landing around me, at my feet, you know, people around me dropping. I got back in from, you know, from where I was, and, you know, the padre, who's the kind of military, you know, religious person, military vicar, came over and put his hand on my shoulder and was like, "You all right, lad?" And I was like, "Yes, Padre." That was it. That was my PTSD counseling.
And that's it.
Yeah. That's as far as it went at that time. It's a lot better now. You know, they've really kind of come on with what they offer. But yeah, that's as far as you went, because you just bottled it all up and, you know, compartmentalized and moved on.
So how do you think you processed and got rid of it so that it had no impact on you, if it didn't, or did it?
Well, it didn't. My year of self-love, I did all sorts of stuff. I did hypnotherapy. I had kind of what I called Rent-A-Dad, who was just this amazing human being who was a business coach, but he just didn't realize. I mean, he was pretty rubbish at business. But, you know,
he was a great human being.
Great human being.
Nice.
Yeah. And just added perspective on life. You know, I love me. You know, he was a bit older. I'd say mid to late 60s. And, you know, just add the little bit of advice that was, it doesn't really matter. It feels like it matters, but it doesn't matter. So a lot about relationship with yourself, you know, relationship with your family, relationship with kids, you know, that was a year of really evolving around that. And not because I ever thought there was an issue. Like the hypnosis was fantastic, because I went in there going, go and have a go. Hypnotized me. 10 minutes in and I was kind of dribbling sessions in, and there's tears running down my cheek. And I was like, nothing savage, you know, nothing horrific. It was just really simple little things, but nothing I ever did in the military ever came up.
Interesting. How do you think that's possible, or why?
It's either bottled up, and when I'm in my 50s I'm going to grow a ponytail and buy a Harley Davidson, or I just managed to diffuse it. Got bigger problems, I suppose.
What could be bigger than that?
Everything has perspective, and I think you kind of I think you grow around what the problem was at the time, so it loses the impact that it had at the time. So the first time I was shot at, you know, or the first time, you know, like separating from my wife and realizing I'm not going to see my kids every day. And actually, just being able to talk about that's a big thing, because for me, being a successful person, you know, I stand in front of people, and this is something a lot of people grapple with. You know, a lot of my coaching clients are going, oh, you know, my wife's not aligned with, or my husband's not aligned with what I'm doing, and I've got to be so impartial with my advice, because having been through that, that's how I kind of, you know, with my kind of partner now came up with the concepts of health, income, life, just to simplify the complexity of getting on with it. So yeah, I think it's about adding perspective, and I feel like I've been able to diffuse those bits and bobs by myself.
Which is very unusual, I'd say, from what I've heard of people that have gone through traumatic experiences, which military is for sure, especially in the environments that you've described.
It was also fun.
It was also fun.
Yeah.
Good. What was fun about it? What made it fun?
Traveled the world and did stuff that you read about in books, and
I guess you get to live out the hero experience, which I can imagine, especially for a young man, is something important.
Yeah, that it's funny, the words. So when I spent some time in the States, and you know, the military, you know, veterans and serving military, you kind of worshipped. You're out in uniform, and people come and shake your hand, and people, you know, you get free coffee. I saw that.
And you love coffee.
I love coffee. Yeah. It's just the word hero I used to hate, because I never did it for that. But then, you know, when the kind of most recent conflicts went on, I would be out in uniform and people would come and shake my hand in the UK. And even the concept of Help for Heroes, I hated the name Heroes.
Why?
Probably because most people don't really do it for thanks. You know, they do it for their own reasons, and quite often camaraderie and the military are, you know, that you're looking after the people around you. You're not really thinking queen or king now and country. You know, you're thinking of my team. And for me, I was never really bothered about putting my life in danger. I was bothered about when I had to send troops into an environment that I knew statistically, you know, something was going to happen to them. That was a much harder kind of decision to make.
I can only imagine. It's one thing being responsible for yourself and your own health, safety, finances, and a completely different thing when you have the burden of X amount of people on your shoulders. How has your understanding of your purpose evolved over time? And what is it now? Do you know?
I am very comfortable that I don't know, but I know I will know.
How do you know you will know?
I've just got a feeling. And
Trust
just
your gut.
yeah. And I think my purpose evolves and alters. And I think that, you know, I've got such a kind of, I don't want to get too excited explaining, but, you know, such a kind of like drive that I feel like I constantly suppress. And
Why?
Constantly hold, because I'm waiting to put it into the right direction and the right environment. You know, I know that I love property investment. I know that I love giving good people good places to live. I know that I love working with investors, something. So my concept is something international, something holistic that fits around. You know, I'm not really a business coach. I'm a health, wealth and happiness, you know, because I don't think you can have one without the other. I've probably got I'm aiming for another 5 or 6 years and then have another retirement. That's my...
Will that be your final retirement? Probably not. Yeah.
No. I don't think I'll ever stop. I think I'll keep going.
And you know why I think that is? I think even the term retirement is probably very faulty in its own, because it implies us doing something by default that we don't like. Yeah. So we need to retire from it. So I think as a society, and to be fair, we're moving towards that. I mean, we have 4-day work weeks now. Remote work is very prevalent. And I think more and more as a society, we're getting conscious of the fact that we shouldn't be feeling bad at our workplace. We should be enjoying what we're doing. So there might never be a need for a retirement if you're doing something that you like doing. And as, you know, cliche as this might sound, I think not enough people are thinking about it. Like, your default state in your life shouldn't ever be a feeling of, oh, I hate this place. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, knowing that what you like doing is quite difficult as well. You know, you're meant to be happiest in your 50s because you know what you don't know. You know what you like and don't like, and you tend to have the confidence or the ability to influence that. So the idea is to fast forward that. What I do with a lot of coaching clients, a lot of people, is I see people who go through something later on in life, you know, like something happens and that suddenly reframes everything and they come out of themselves born again, whatever it is. And it's how you can not have to go through that, but get to that feeling.
How?
The first step is awareness. And I think, I said kind of income is relatively simple. You've just got to copy someone doing something that relatively enjoy and keep going with it.
I think I want to stop there because it's a point worth emphasizing, because people often try, and myself included in the past, try things, but then don't stick to it in long enough to see the results.
One of my favorite, I suppose, groups of people are people that don't realize how good they are. Don't realize how. I'm working with a guy at the moment, and he's just got a fantastic business and mindset, and it's all come from himself. And as soon as I overlay a little bit of growth, a little bit of systems, a little bit of add a naught to it. What's the difference with someone? He's got a construction firm. What's the difference with someone that does £500,000 conversions to 5 million to 50 million?
Probably mindset limits.
That's it. Perhaps they speak to different people during the day. They've got a different team around them. They've got a different accountant, a different business advisor,
essentially different people that they hang around with.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think is a big indicator of, whether you'll be successful or not. It's a really hard pill to swallow for people when I say do an audit of everyone you spend your time around. Do an audit of, everyone that's on your social media. My social media is purely, most of the time it's not me, but my social media is purely for business. And as soon as I find myself, which I do sometimes, find myself scrolling, I have kind of a, what you doing?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I undergone a very serious shift for myself with social media in the past year when I started doing all of this. But also before that, I came to this realization that I'm literally giving away my life force, my best years to this little screen doing absolutely nothing. And it's okay to check in with your friends, like your best friends, your family, see what they do. That's awesome. But percentage wise, how much is that versus when you're just scrolling out of a habit? That's life lost. That is life lost. So now my policy is social media is for business, and fine, I allow that, margin of 5 to 10%, because I'm not perfect, of it being social. Like I share when I want to share. If I'm doing something nice, something cool that I think might inspire people, okay, I'll share that. But that's pretty much it. Yeah. And I think that's how it should be, because when we realize that the tech companies are making money off of us scrolling and spending our time, I think then you shift that perspective and you're like, well, actually, let me make this a business.
Yeah. And also I think we can convince ourselves we're doing it for good reasons, because we're looking for business ideas, or we're looking for investors, or we're looking for, whatever our business is. So last year, my view was to up my network. That was my year of networking, and I spoke at 36 events. This year is my digital year. So since January, pretty much every day, me or somebody's been posting on social media, podcasts.
I'll be very curious
webinars.
To have a conversation end of the year to see how those 2 years compared to you and what they gave you.
It's an experiment.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I love marketing. I love how do you capture somebody's awareness and get them to make a decision to do something off the back of what you've shown them.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
What has worked for you so far best?
I probably get 5 or 6 times as many views, if that's a metric, if I put a photo of my face on or somebody's face.
Yeah, because people want to do business with people, not
they do, yeah.
Whatever, some names,
yeah.
some
but then
companies.
I also think it deepens a lot of relationships, that you already have. Because I would rather know 100 people really, really well than 1,000 people to say hi to.
That's very true. And that just brings us back to how social media works these days. Again, we spend so much time watching people that you don't even know. Why are you doing that? It's really, unless again you're doing it for business and you're doing market research and competitor analysis, what are you really doing? Or to be fair, getting inspiration, then why are you doing that? Build your life.
But off the back of This year's so far, I would say once a week I have somebody message me with opportunity. I just think it's a really exciting time, to be.
It's
to
an
be in
incredible
business.
tool used
Yeah.
wisely, for
Yeah,
sure,
it is.
for
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've obviously coached a lot of people. How long have you been doing that now?
As a coaching business for 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Magic number. And so what is the problem that you see most recurring in people that impedes them to get to where they want to be?
Hi there, I hope you're enjoying this episode. You can listen to the full audio version for free on your favorite podcast app. And if you are enjoying this video version, I invite you to join my exclusive Patreon community to support the making of the show and to unlock a ton of exclusive content, such as the full video episodes, bloopers, some controversial topics, and more personal questions from the guests, and much more. Link is in the description below.